بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين حمد الشاكرين والذاكرين والمتحققين بحقائق معرفة رب العالمين على وجه العبودية، والصلاة والسلام على خير البرية سيدنا ونبينا محمد وعلى آله وأصحابه وأتباعه إلى يوم الدين. Alhamdulillah, in our dars on Nur al-Idah, in which we're looking at this wonderful work of Imam Shurunbulali and striving to understand it with clarity, we are now going to start the book of purification. And if you were with us in both form and spirits, you will notice that the opening of Nur al-Idah is different from the opening of Maraq al-Falah. But because we're studying Nur al-Idah, we're not looking at the opening of Maraq al-Falah. The opening of Maraq al-Falah has a number of important fawaid. You know, we are not in a murder mystery where only at the end will we discover who did it. So if you want to benefit from an unpacking of the opening of the Maraqi, we have Dars Maraq al-Falah. You don't have to take it, but sometimes it can help to unpack certain things. And there are many points of benefit in the opening of the Maraqi that are of benefit to navigating here. We will resist the temptation to go into that. So he tells us, Kitab al-Tahara, right? The book of purification. And here he begins right away with Aqsam al-Miyah, right? So he begins right away with Aqsam al-Miyah, the types of water, right? Because Tahara is mentioned before Salah because it is the Miftah as-Salah. It's the key to prayer. And the key to Tahara is al-Mutatahhar bihi. What you make Tahara with. What is al-Mutatahhar bihi? Al-Mutatahhar bihi, what you make Tahara with is asalatan water. Right? Is asalatan water. When there is water available, you can only make Tahara with water. Now Tahara overall is of two types. Right? There's Tahara min al-ahdath, and there's Tahara min al-hadath, and there's a Tahara min al-khabath. Right? Purity is from two matters. From hadath, right? Tahara is from two matters. Firstly is Tahara from khabath, from hadath, and hadath is ritual impurity. Hadath is of two types. Ritual impurity is of two types. Hadath asghar, lesser ritual impurity, which is ma yastawjibu al-wudu, which is what requires wudu. And hadath akbar, which is ma yastawjibu al-ghusl. Right? And greater hadath, which is that which requires ghusl. Right? And we'll be seeing that. But Tahara, insofar as it relates to purity from ritual impurity, requires water. In the absence of water, you cannot make wudu or ghusl. What is your recourse then? Is إِن لَمْ تَجِدُوا مَاءً فَتَيَمَّمُوا صَعِيدًا طَيِّبًا. If you do not find water, then use pure top surface of the earth, i.e. for tayammum. So that is the first category of tahara. Tahara from ritual impurity. The second type of tahara is the tahara min al-khabath, is purification from filth. Right? And the purification from filth, can be with water or with anything that removes the filth. in our madhab. And we'll be coming to the ahkam, izalat al-najasa, the removal of filth. Right? Right? Now, tahara, right, is defined as the removal of ritual and tangible impurity. زوال حدث أو خبث. Right? It's the removal of ritual or physical impurity. Right? Or more precisely, the lifting of physical and ritual impurity. Because you don't have to intend tahara. Tahara is a condition for prayer. And as Hanafis, we have to be very clear on this. Conditions are sought, the conditions are met, they do not need to be sought. Conditions are met, they do not need to be sought. So let's say that Brother Hamza has a friend who decided to take up reflection and dhikr. So he asked Ustad Hamza, how long should I make dhikr so I can benefit? He says, at least 15 minutes each morning. So any advice? He says, when you start dhikr, don't move around and don't fidget. His friend took it very seriously. He's sitting in his place. He's sit against a tree, eyes closed, making dhikr and fikr, remembrance and reflection. Dog comes and urinates on Hamza's friend. He's made his 15 minutes of dhikr, says, I don't know what to do. He goes to sleep. Dog urinated on him. And there's a rainstorm while he's asleep. He wakes up, there's no filth on him. Did he intend to remove the filth? No. Filth is gone. But he's dripping wet. Then you remember second advice of his respected Quran teacher, that don't leave Salatul Duha. He's dripping wet right now. No filth, he's dripping wet. Does he have wudu? Well, it's a little bit tricky, because that would depend on when do you deem, because the state of sleep, but let's say he woke up and it's still raining and he's dripping wet. So I'll leave you guys to think, at what point does sleep invalidate wudu? I won't tell you the answer, but that's why definitions are important, and you can think about it. So this is an important principle. Across the board in the Hanafi school, العبرة في الشروط حصولها لا تحصيلها. What counts with conditions is that they be met, not that they be sought. And tahara is like that. So in our case, Hamza's friend both removed the filth, because the removal of filth did not require intention, and he is in wudu. He woke up and the rainstorm is still happening. Face, arms, head, feet, all got washed. He has tahara, khalas. So that is how we view the issue of tahara. It's a condition. It is met. It does not have to be sought. However, wudu and ghusl can only be done through water. Right? Removal of filth with anything that removes the filth. And that's coming later. So given this reality, anyone have a spare pen? Spare. Okay. Given this reality, the first thing he tells us about is water. Why? Given this reality, the first thing he begins with is the types of water. So we've shared a definition of tahara. We're going to have an MD in the class, right? a master of definitions will keep a repository of definitions in a Google Doc, which only he and I have editing access for, right? So we're going to share these definitions, right? And we'll give access to the students. So the first definition, of course, is tahara itself, right? So we'll share the definition in English, Arabic. It's zawalu hadathin wa khabath, right? Some of the ulama argued that no, it is izalatul hadathi wal khabath. It is not that the filth be removed, it is the removal, because that's what the morally responsible person is responsible for, is the removal. But that's a subtle difference. Okay. Then he says, rahimahullah ta'ala, on the book of purification, Kitab al-Tahara, Bismillah.
كتاب الطهارة المياه التي يجوز التطهير بها 7 مياه ماء السماء وماء البحر وماء النهر وماء البئر وماء الثلج وماء البرد وماء العين.
So he says, rahimahullah ta'ala, the book of purification, we took the definition of purification. He says the water from which it is valid to purify with are 7. And this is these types of water are with respect to their sources, right? With respect to their sources. And the 7 here is illustrative, not encompassing. Right? Are illustrative, not encompassing. Right? The waters by which it is valid to engage in purification, tathir, right? Tathir is, of course, a masdar. What is the root? What is the root? What is the verbal pattern? Right? Tahara yutahhiru tathiran, right? Is to tathiran, right? So tathir, to engage in purifying with, right? That you can purify with are 7, right? And this idafa, these 7 waters, this is in terms of sources of water. It could be something else, right? So can you make tahara with water that is created in a lab? Can you create water in a lab? Yes, because what is water? H2O, right? So, right? So can you use lab water? Yeah. Etc. So these are 7 common sources. Now, why would you mention these sources? For several reasons. Amongst them, just that common or uncommon sources of water, but also لِتِعْدَادِ نِعَمِهِ تَعَالَى. All, right? To mention the many mercy, blessings of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala upon us, right? Because water is the basis of life, right? Water is the basis of life, right? Both human life, animal life, vegetative life. So that's one of the wisdoms. If you look in the Maraqi, and we won't, he mentions the verses and so on that talk about this. So the first is rainwater. Ma'us sama is rainwater. Right? And if you have a copy of the Maraqi, you'll see various verses about this. But Ma'us sama is Ma'ul matar. You can't call it sky water, right? If you translate as sky water, that is an airy-fairy translation. It's rainwater, right? Second is Ma'ul bahr. sea water, right? Water from the sea, even though it is salty. Because the Prophet ﷺ clarified that, right, in hadith. And you can see the hadith in the Maraqi. It's a hadith in Abi Dawood and others. It has many legal rulings associated with it. The third is river water, right? Right? And it has come that there are 4 rivers of earth that are from the rivers of heaven. Sayhun and Jayhun, Furat, and the Nile. Right? And we won't go into it, but that the greatest of water is the water that emanated from the hands of the Prophet ﷺ. Then you have Kawthar and Zamzam. And then you have the Nile water. It was not Egyptians who said that, but that's, so there is a merit to Nile water that is textually established after the other waters. It's not something that would cause one to take Nile water with you if you travel, but there's merit to it. Anyways, and well water. And right? وَمَاءُ الثَّلْجِ وَمَاءُ الْبَرَدِ. And there's a difference between Nur al-Idah and the Maraqi in terms of the text here, correct? Because he clarified in the Maraqi that, so here he says, and in the Maraqi he says, مَاءُ الثَّلْجِ وَمَاءُ الْبَرَدِ, and the water of snow, right? Right? Which means, and you can take the expression from the Maraqi and the matan in the Maraqi, which says, وَمَا ذَابَ مِنَ الثَّلْجِ وَالْبَرَدِ, and that which melts from snow and hail. Right? But the Nur al-Idah expression is also sound, insofar as مَاءُ الثَّلْجِ, the water of snow, means what melts from snow. And what counts is that it is melted upon usage. Because let's say if the temperature is right around 0 degrees, sometimes the snow remains in snow form, even if it's like 2 degrees outside, as any Canadian would know. So if you put snow at that kind of temperature on your skin, what will happen? It'll melt. Once it's melted, if it flows on you, you can use it. But it's best just to melt it and then use it. And likewise, al-barad and water from hails. Al-barad with a fatha is hails. And ma'ul ayn, and spring water. Right? Spring water. That which either springs out from the ground or, that's in a stream. Okay. Then he tells us about the types of water, right? So here he mentions first the sources of water, right? And why they're mentioned, right? And the need for gratitude for the sources of water, right? Now, if you look in the Maraqi, and we won't give this, you need to appreciate what is water, right? And the Maraqi gives you a rigorous definition of water, right? But water, right? Water is a subtle body, right? Is a subtle body that has 2 essential qualities, which is الرقة والسيلان, right? That its subtlety and its flowingness. Legally, water is what you can call water. Al-ma'ul mutlaq, and we'll come to that because it's one of the legal categories of water. Unconditioned water, we'll be defining it short. So that's what water is. Water's two is jawharun, latifun, sayyal, right? It's a subtle flowing body, right? It being shaffaf, that is just descriptive, right? It's these two qualities. It is subtle and flowing. Water remains legally water, meaning unconditioned water, if you can call it water. So in that sense, water is ma yasihhu itlaqu ism al-ma'i alayhi. Water is what you can still call water. Without one of three things happening. Duna qaydin, without having to condition it. That you have to say, like if you have water and you squeeze a whole lemon, both halves, into it, and you stir it, would you still call it water? 1 cup of water, whole lemon into it. Would you still call it water? Could you still call it water? Only with a condition. You could call it lemon water, let's say. But could you call it only water? No. So water is legally water if you can, firstly, you can call it water without condition. لصحة إطلاق اسم الماء عليه دون قيد, without condition. Right? Right? Secondly, it has not become used water. So it's unconditioned, unused, unfilthy. Right? There's 3 U's. Unconditioned, that you can't, let's say you have, anyone ever had rose water? Like good quality rose water, not like ancient rose water you find in some, ethnic stores, but good quality rose water, right? Now, if you put a couple of drops of rose water in your drinking water, is it still called water? Yeah. It's water, but it's got a slight taste of something. You can call it water. But if you put enough rose water, you would no longer call that water. So water is water. You can call it water without having to condition it, that it's lemon water, rose water, saffron water, or whatever. Second, that it's unused, and we'll look at the definition of used. And number 3, it's not filthy, unfilthy. This is to put 3 U's, right? Unconditioned, unused, unfilthy, right? Or you could say three negations: not conditioned, not used, not filthy. It's probably more elegant English. Clear? Okay. Then he gives us another classification of water. So the first classification of water was according to sources. Now he tells us about the types of water according to ruling. So he tells us, rahimahullah ta'ala, we'll read the whole thing and then we'll explain it.
ثم المياه على 5 أقسام: طاهر مطهر غير مكروه وهو الماء المطلق، وطاهر مطهر مكروه وهو ما شربت منه الهرة ونحوها وكان قليلا، وطاهر غير مطهر وهو ما استعمل لرفع حدث أو لقربة كالوضوء على الوضوء بنيته، ويصير الماء مستعملا بمجرد انفصاله عن الجسد.
أحسنتم جزاكم الله خير. So water, this is تقسيم المياه باعتبار من حيث الوصف والحكم. Right? المياه من حيث الوصف, water with respect to its characteristic and its ruling. So he says, then water is of 5 types in terms of its characteristic and its consequential ruling. The first is purifying, is pure and purifying and not disliked. And that is unconditioned water. Pure and purifying, pure in itself. Ma tahir fi nafsihi. Pure in itself. Mutahhir, purifying of other than itself. Ghayru makruh, without it being disliked. So this is differentiating it from the next category, right? And this is al-ma'ul mutlaq. This is unconditioned water. This is what comes out of the tap, right? What is unconditional water? Right? It is that which you can call water without having to use a condition, without it having been used, and without filth affecting it. Right? And here, see Zain, I'll send you a picture. There's two definitions. One from, well, three definitions that we should add to the document. Right? One is from the Bada'i' of Imam al-Kasani, and the second is from the Durr, right? And you can see it from the Hadiyah al-Ala'iyya as well. Hadiyah defines al-ma' al-mutlaq, but so that is the definition of al-ma'ul mutlaq, right? Al-ma'ul mutlaq, unconditioned water. Right? Is that which you can call water without having to condition it, as mentioned. So that's water, right? The second is water that is pure and purifying, yet it is somewhat disliked to use if there's other water. So it's pure and purifying, yet disliked, right? Meaning it is somewhat disliked. Makruh tanzihan, and it's somewhat disliked if there's other water available. If other water is not available, it is not somewhat disliked to use. Right? And what is that? That is water that has been drunk by a cat. And by a cat here we mean a domesticated cat as opposed to a wild cat. Or the like of it. Right? The like of the cat are what are called sawakinul buyut, other small creatures that live at home. Right? Right? Such as a chicken that roams amongst filth and then drinks from water, for example. Right? And the reason for this is that we'll see in a little bit, the ruling of water follows the ruling of its saliva. So water that an animal drinks from follows the ruling of the animal's saliva. And the animal's saliva follows the ruling of its meat. So edible animals, their saliva is pure. Well, humans and edible animals, their saliva is pure. So therefore their meat, if something like a cow drinks from water, what's the ruling of the water? Right? Saliva follows the ruling of the meat. So now, can you eat a cat? Could we, after this class, could we have roasted cat for dinner? Could we? Can we? It's not a trick question. No, you can't. Jazakallah khair. We didn't require mufti. Right? You can't have roasted cat for dinner. Right? So we will retain 3 cats at home, inshallah. And don't mention that joke to the ladies of the house, please. They won't appreciate it. We have 3 ladies and 3, we have 3 women, 3 men, and 3 cats at our house. If that joke reaches the 3 women, there may be 3 women, 3 cats, but not 3 men in the house, at least for tonight. So let's keep it between us. Okay. You can't eat a cat. Cats are non-edible. Their meat, even if slaughtered, is non-edible. The saliva should be filthy, correct? Therefore, if a cat drank from water, it would be filthy. That is qiyas, that is legal analogy. However, the Prophet ﷺ lifted that ruling, and the Sahaba were surprised. The Prophet ﷺ saw a cat, he tilted a bowl for the cat to drink from. And the Sahaba were surprised. So he said, إِنَّهَا لَيْسَتْ بِنَجِسَةٍ. It is not filthy. Why did he say that? Because they applied what they knew prior. So he said, إِنَّهَا لَيْسَتْ بِنَجِسَةٍ. It is not filthy. إِنَّهَا مِنَ الطَّوَّافِينَ عَلَيْكُمْ وَالطَّوَّافَاتِ. It is of those who roam amongst you and around you. So they applied the same ruling of cats to other animals that are around human beings, like chickens. Of course, chickens are tahir. There's no issue with chickens, but if the chicken is eating from najasa frequently, and then it drinks from your bowl of water, because there's a possibility that there may be filth on its thing, but you're not sure, right? And other such animals. So if you have a cat, the cat drank from some water, like from a bucket of water, can you make wudu with it? Yes. But if there's other water, it would be somewhat disliked to use it. And the same thing applies to food. So it applies to water for wudu, but also can you drink water that your cat drank from? It's pure. But if you have other water, let the cat finish the water or pour it into a plant or something. It's better not to drink the water that a cat drank from. Likewise, it would happen to the food. If a cat ate from food, then the place that the cat ate from, it's best not to eat it. It's permissible to eat it. If you're hard up and you don't have any other food, then you can eat it, it's tahir. But it is better just the place. So you have biryani, so the section of the biryani the cat ate from, put that aside. Whether you let the cat eat it or not, that's not my problem. Right? So this is the disliked. That's if there's other water available. And the dislikedness is slight. Makruh tanzihan. The third category of water is water that is pure but not purifying. Pure in itself, but not purifying of other than itself. And this is called al-ma'ul musta'mal, right? Which is water that was used either to lift impurity. Lift impurity, i.e., used, right? It was used to lift ritual impurity, right? مَسْتُعْمِلَ لِرَفْعِ حَدَث. To lift ritual impurity was, you didn't have wudu, you used this water to make wudu. You required ghusl, so you use this water to make ghusl. That's rafa hadath. That you did not have ritual impurity and you use this water. أو لقربة, or for an act of drawing closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, which is, for example, you had wudu, but you made wudu upon wudu with the niyyah of drawing closer to Allah. Right? Such as wudu upon wudu with the intention of wudu. So he gives an explanation. Now, what water becomes used? This is important to be clear. Right? The water that becomes used is the water that came in contact with your hands and fell away. Right? Only that water becomes used. The water that came in contact with your limb and fell off the limb, only that part becomes used. So he says that the water becomes used, يصير الماء المستعملا, when it separates from the limb. When the water is on the limb, it is not used. Right? They say why? ضرورة التطهير, out of the necessity of purifying. So if you took a little bit of water, You know, if you roll up your sleeve, you took a little bit of water in your hand, right? And the water flows down your arm, and you turn it around on the other side, and it flows back down the arm, a little bit of water, and then you rub. So water flowed all over your arm, did a 360, and you caught it back. Let's say 50% of the water still in your arm. While it's still in your arm, is it used? No. But when it leaves the arm, goes to another limb, can you transfer it to the other limb? No. Once it separates from the limb, it's used. So you couldn't use the water from one limb, right? If you're smart, you made the water flow from one limb, you caught it in the other. Could you make wudu? No. Because once it separates from that limb, it's used. While it's on one limb, it is unused. For wudu, each limb is considered separately. In ghusl, the whole body is one limb. So if you had just 2 liters of water and you tried to make ghusl, you poured the water from your head and it reached your toes. How many limbs did it pass through? You can count them. But in ghusl, the whole body is considered one limb. Now, we're used to wasting water and using taps and so on, but in situations where water was very tight, this would be a consideration. Now, if water drips, right, if you have conditioned water, which is pure, not purifying, right? If it mixes with unconditioned water, so you're making wudu over a bucket of water. So you have a 10-liter bucket of water. You make wudu. You washed your face. The water that comes off your face, what is its ruling? Used. But if the used water falls into a bucket of water, does the whole bucket become used? No, because the bucket is unconditioned water, right? All of it's unused. But this is khilaful awla. It's improper to do this. Why? Because let's say your cousin made wudu over a bucket of water. Would you then drink from that bucket of water? Even if it's your cousin. Right? But some sweaty auntie or uncle made wudu, would you use that bucket of water? No, right? Would you want to drink your own water after making wudu? Probably not, right? So that is when it becomes used. And so this is the third category of water, used water. Now, this does arise in rare circumstances in our times, right? But you don't have to worry about this in the general case that we deal with, right? Like with making wudu from a tap, etc. So we're not going to go into a lot of details. Then he tells us about water that is conditioned, right? Water that is conditioned. Al-ma'ul muqayyad, right? Ma'ul muqayyad. And we'll pause here, bi'idhnillahi ta'ala, pray maghrib and come back. So we'll be back in 10 minutes and we'll continue, bi'idhnillahi subhanahu. For those of you online, if you could help me keep a we need to put a maghrib warning. Okay. Just one thing, if you do have questions so far that relate to what we've covered, if while you're waiting, you can type your questions in the chat, and then we'll tackle them bi'idhnillahi ta'ala. Okay, so the next section, the author tells us about conditioned water. And the basis is that water can be affected in two ways, right? The water can be affected by something pure such that it can no longer be called unconditioned water, right? And it being affected by something pure that conditions it would be either by it becoming used or it becoming conditioned water. Conditioned water is such that you could no longer call it water, right? Now, the fuqaha are very careful not to make absolute statements. Why? Because anytime you make an absolute statement, you're wrong, if there's only even one obvious exception. So generally, they addressed this issue on a case-by-case basis. This is no longer water. This is no longer water. The underlying criteria being that this thing can no longer be called water. Right? Because if you recall the definition of unconditioned water, it is that which you can call water without requiring to put to put a condition on it. Lemon water, this, that, whatever. So it comes down to basically, right? So we're calling if the water is conditioned by something pure. Because if the water is conditioned by something impure, then that is filthy water. That's a separate matter. If the water is conditioned by something pure, then the water, the thing that mixes with the water can either be solid or liquid. Something pure mixes with water. Could be solid, like leaves. Or it could be liquid, like lemon juice. Okay? So, if the underlying condition is, can you still call it water? If you can no longer call it water, it is not unconditional water. But if a pure thing mixes with water, it's either solid or liquid. If a solid mixes with water, what counts for it to remain water is that the water is what? Is a riqqa wa saylan. That the water retains its essential quality of being subtle and flowing. Even if all the attributes of water change. What are the attributes of water? Color, smell, taste. So let's say that Hamza's friend, today we're picking on Hamza's friend. Hamza's friend, even though he got purified by the rain, he wanted to go and take a bath in the forest. He finds this beautiful clearing. It's serene, spiritual, because it's made a lot of dhikr and reflection. It seems paradisical. There's a clearing in the forest of eucalyptus trees, in the middle of which there's a pond of water. The wind is blowing. There's a little opening, which is the path that he came on. But that same wind causes the eucalyptus leaves to fall into this pond. The pond of water has so many eucalyptus trees, leaves in it, that the water is green. The water has a smell. It has a taste. Can Hamza's friend use that water to make wudu? If leaves are solid, leaves mixed with water, as long as the water retains its subtlety and its flowingness, doesn't matter if color, smell, or taste change, you can still make wudu with it. As long as you could still call it water. That's if a solid mixes with water. Now, if you apply that to tea leaves, you have a pot, a clear pot of water, room temperature. You put some leaves of tea into it. Can you make wudu with it? What's this? Has the name changed? You put room temperature water, you put you put 2 spoons of tea into it. Room temperature water. Does it become tea? But if you understand diffusion, the color starts changing a little bit. The color's changed. It's fresh tea, good quality tea, some nice Darjeeling, for example, or whatever else, equal opportunity. It's nice Kenyan tea, Sri Lankan Ceylon tea, or whatever other tea. Color changes, smell changes, taste changes. Does any of that matter? No. What matters there is that is it still subtle and flowing? Those are the essential qualities of water, subtle and flowing. Or you could no longer call it water. At some point, when you put tea leaves in water, you can no longer call it water, you'd call it tea. At that point, with the solid, if what mixes with water is a solid, if it retains its essential qualities, it's unconditioned. If it loses its essential qualities, it's no longer water, which is subtle and flowing. Or it loses its name. Now, if you leave tea, if you do with tea, if you leave tea overnight at room temperature, will it leave water with tea leaves 24 hours? Will it become tea? Yes. You can make cold brewed tea. Right? At some point, you could no longer call it water. Right? That's zawalu sihhati itlaqi ism al-ma' alayhi. You can no longer call it water. That's if a solid mixes with water. So the eucalyptus example, eucalyptus leaves in the water. If the water still has the characteristics of water, you could use it. Mud mixes with water. So it's a muddy stream or muddy pool. Mud mixes with water. Can you make wudu with it? If the water is muddy, can you use it for wudu? Yes. Subtle and flowing, but it has color, smell, taste changes, but it's still flowing. But if the water becomes mud, can you still call it water? No. So that's a solid mixing with water. A liquid mixing with water, you have water and orange juice. At the point here we consider غلبة الأوصاف, the preponderation of attributes. When the attributes of water preponderate over the attributes, or where the attributes of the liquid that mixes with water preponderate over the attributes of water clearly. And this clearly part is discussed by Shaykh Abdul Ghani Nabulsi in Nihayatul Murad. You have it? You don't have Nihayatul Murad? That's another 25 push-ups, Sidi. I should sort of get your wife to administer the push-ups. No. Get Nihayatul Murad. Dar al-Bayruti reprinted it. Right? So Shaykh Abdul Ghani al-Nabulsi has a brilliant work called Nihayatul Murad fi Sharh Hadiyat ibn Imad. If you're a serious student of knowledge, you should aspire to get a copy of it. So if the attributes of the thing that mixes with the water preponderate, what are the attributes of water? Essential quality of water, which is what counts with solids, is subtle and flowing. The attributes of water are color, smell, taste. So let's say that pomegranate juice. Strong color, strong smell, strong taste. That which has three attributes, if two of them become zahir, become manifest clearly, and zahir become manifest clearly because you put pomegranate, a little bit of pomegranate juice in water, will it change the color? Slightly, that's not zahir. But when it clearly changes the water's color, clearly changes its smell, so when two of the three attributes become manifest, you can no longer use it. If it has three attributes. If it has two, if one attribute becomes manifest. Or if it has one attribute, then if one becomes manifest. If it has no attributes, then you consider by weight. Which one? By volume. Which is more by volume. And when you're not certain, what do? Use your judgment. And all of this with the same proviso, as long as you can still call it's water if you can still call it water. It's not water if you can no longer call it water. And the reason this is important, chlorine. Anyone have experience with swimming pools? Anyone have experience with swimming pools? Do they put liquid chlorine or dry chlorine? Anyone online? No swimmers around?
I think dry chlorine.
It's a trick question. Some places they put dry chlorine, sometimes they put liquid chlorine. Right? Now, or sometimes actually, anyway, there's many ways. We don't need to go into, you can look up chlorine in swimming pools. But let's say they're putting liquid chlorine into the swimming pool. Strong chlorine has smell, has taste. Can you make wudu from a swimming pool? Why? Because you can still call it water. That's one. Second reason is because are these qualities really manifest? No. The smell of the water, is it strong? You could say no. The awsaf are not zahir. They're khafi. They're subtle. Okay. So you can use, if you lost your wudu and you went swimming in a swimming pool, the presence of chlorine does not make it unconditioned. Does not condition the water. Some people come up with wacky, far-fetched examples that people get waswasa. You should execute waswasa, right? Which is that, they put minerals and fluoride and God knows what else in the water. Firstly, doesn't matter because of the reasons. Okay, so the classification is pure water, pure substance. It's still water as long as it's subtle and flowing and you can call it water. The substance mixing with water is liquid. What counts is that it's still water if the characteristics of water predominate, if the characteristics of the liquid predominate that mixed with water, then it becomes conditioned. And the underlying criteria is, can you still call it water? Okay, so that's the conceptual breakdown. He tells us, rahimahullah ta'ala,
ولا يجوز الوضوء بماء شجر وثمر ولو خرج بنفسه من غير عصر في الأظهر ولا بماء زال طبعه بالطبخ أو بغلبة غيره عليه والغلبة في مخالطة الجامدات بإخراج الماء عن رقته وسيلانه ولا يضر تغير أوصافه كلها بجامد كزعفران وفاكهة وورق شجر والغلبة في المائعات بظهور وصف واحد من مائع له وصفان فقط كاللبن له اللون والطعم ولا رائحة له وبظهور وصفين من مائع له أوصاف ثلاثة كالخل والغلبة في المائع الذي لا وصف له كالماء المستعمل وماء الورد المنقطع الرائحة تكون بالوزن فإن اختلط رطلان من الماء المستعمل برطل من المطلق لا يجوز به الوضوء وبعكسه جاز.
Okay, so that's a long section. We'll take it step by step. Firstly, he tells us that purification is not valid with water that comes out from a tree or a plant, even if it comes out by itself without being extracted, according to the more evident of two positions. So let's say there's a tree and a water-like liquid comes out of the tree by itself. Can you make wudu with it? No. Why? Because there's two opinions on this. One, if it looks like water, could you call it water? So there's one strong position within the madhab that you can. This is held by some big scholars of the school, right? But, and we won't explain that. You can see who says that other opinion, right? But if somebody knows, right, would you call it water? Water that comes out from a cut in a tree and you gathered it in a bucket, would you call it water? Right, so there's ikhtilaf on this, right? Because it's a matter of judgment. But caution, there's a necessary caution also needed, which is why this opinion predominated, that it is not valid to make wudu with water that comes out by itself from a tree or a plant, even if it has the qualities of water. This is fil adhar according to the more manifest of two evident opinions. There's a line of argument that you could make wudu with it. There's a line of argument you can't, and typically there's water around, right? Typically there's water around. And necessary caution, if this is the only water you had, what would you do instead? Make tayammum, right? Because there's strong argument that no, this is water from tree, right? Now if you got the water out, there's agreement that if you squeezed it out or whatever, then that's not water. Okay. Then if, and also, nor can you make wudu with water that loses its essential quality by cooking. Right? By cooking, the essential quality of water is it being subtle and flowing. And we'll share a diagram of this under the lesson 2 resources, inshallah, in the next 24 hours, so you can see it. So if water is cooked with something, or if something overcomes it. Now, if water is cooked with something such that it loses its essential quality, why? Because if it doesn't lose its essential quality, there used to be some leaves that they would cook with water for, to make it soapy. You can use that for wudu. Like sidr and other plants, they would heat the water with these leaves. It would give the water a nice smell, a nice smell. Maybe it affects the color enough as well, but makes it a little bit soapy, but it's still water. Right? Okay. So usually if you cook with something is cooked with water, if it's for cleanliness, it's fine. But if you cook something with water for the purpose of cooking, typically you wouldn't call it water anymore. Right? Imagine if you make sort of, with all respect to Europeans, let's say you made some white folk curry. So you put chunks of meat, you made broth, right? You made broth. Now broth, is it subtle and flowing? Yes. But anyone, they see meat and bones, slow cooked in water. Would you call that water still? It has riqqa and sayalan. It's subtle and flowing. Why can't you call it water? Why is it conditioned? Because you can't call it water anymore. Right, so normally, if something is cooked with water, if it's for cleaning, it's still water. Right? Right? If it's the things normally used for cleaning. If it's for cooking, even white folks' curry or broth would not be called, nobody would call it water. And with all respect to white, brown, and yellow, and all colored folk. Okay. Or if something else, أو بغلبة غير عليه, if something else overcomes water. So, and the ghalaba, which you can translate as that which overcomes water, that which overcomes water, if something pure mixes with solids, is by the water no longer retaining its subtle and flowing nature. Right? That's with the solid. We explained that out. And it does not harm that all the attributes of water change. Right? The attributes of water, which are color, smell, and taste. Such as, this is if the solid mixed with water, such as saffron, or a fruit, or the leaves of a tree. Now, we just have to be aware of one thing. Pay attention, my dear friends, to classical Arabic. What is meant by shajar in classical Arabic? Onliners? What's a shajar in classical Arabic? No, a shajar is not a tree in classical Arabic. A tree, a shajar is anything that grows with a clear trunk. So many bushes and shrubs and other plants would be shajar. What did Sayyidina Adam eat from? What's the Quranic verse saying? Min? لا تقربا هذه الشجرة. Do not draw close to this shajara. The ulama differed. What was it? Some said it was wheat. And the reason that why it was wheat, because historically that's been the great staple food of human beings. So that's speculative. So we don't necessarily say it was the apple tree. That's sort of from the biblical tradition. And there's a strong argument it was wheat, because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala taught Adam the names of everything. But it's not just the asma, but it's al-ism wal-musamma, the name and its meaning. Right? علم آدم الأسماء كلها. He taught Adam the names of everything. Right? So they say Sayyidina Adam was taught the names of everything and its meanings. The Prophet ﷺ was granted the names, meanings, and realities of things. What did he say in the Hamziyah? لك ذات العلوم ولآدم منها الأسماء. Or whatever it says in the Hamziyah. I'm a lazy lover of poetry. I just know scattered lines here and there. Anyways, that's the tree of Jannah. So, shajar refers to or the leaves of trees and plants, right? So waraq is leaves, like leaves of trees or plants, same thing. But just a point, don't rely simply on modern dictionaries to understand classical texts. Arabs, don't assume you know Arabic. Not because you don't, you do. But the nature of any language is that meanings shift. Okay. And this preponderation with respect to liquids, we're continuing the text, is if one attribute is manifest of a liquid that has two attributes, such as milk. It has color and taste, but does not have smell. And through the manifestation of two attributes in a liquid that has three attributes, such as vinegar, right? Such as wine vinegar, or apple cider vinegar, or a vinegar that has three colors, if two of the attributes become manifest. And the preponderation in a liquid that has no attributes, such as used water, no color, no smell, no taste, or with rose water that no longer has smell or taste, it's by volume, right? بالوزن. Therefore, if two measures of used water mix with one measure of unconditioned water, then you cannot make wudu with it. And in the opposite case, which is where the unused water, the unconditioned water is more, you can make wudu with it. So that is conditioned water. And inshallah, we'll share a diagram with it. Practically, if used water, let's say that you didn't have wudu. Now, then you wanted to get into a bathtub, right? Or Hamza's friend, after failing to use the eucalyptus water, because when he got to the water, it's actually really thick. He doesn't know what happened, he didn't have to figure it out. But the water had so many leaves, it became like a bog. So he went home, he says, I've had a rough day. A dog urinated on me, I thought I found water, it was paradise. He fell in the bog as well. So now he stinks. He'd visited that pond 6 months before and it was a wonderful experience, water with a beautiful eucalyptus taste. Now it became a bog. He fell in it and it became rotting as well. Comes home, wants to take a bath. He didn't have wudu, because when he fell in the water, in the bog, he lost his wudu too. Gets home, wants to take a bath. So he doesn't have wudu. Right? He prepares a bath. He filled the bathtub and got into the water, and he dipped his head in as well. Is the whole water used now? What is used water? No, he needs wudu only. Okay, no. الماء المستعمل ما استعمل لرفع حدث أو قربة. Right? Used water is water that was used to lift ritual impurity or for an act of drawing closer to Allah. كالوضوء على الوضوء بنيته, like wudu upon wudu. He didn't have wudu. So is the whole bathtub now used? No. The only water that was used was the water that came in contact with his limbs. So the water that came in contact with his limbs became used. Is that more or the rest of the water? The rest of the water. Why is this significant? Because Hamza's friend fell asleep. So he made wudu, fell asleep. His mother came and says, that's where the water went. And he, being a foolish but modest Muslim, Hamza's friend, was taking a bath with his awra covered. Mother comes in, plugs the drain, and they have a rapid drain. So he was awake while the water was draining, right? Is he on wudu? Because there's no water left at home now, because all of it went into the mega tub that he filled. Yes. Right? So, in that situation, right, the water that was used was less than the water that was unused. So the unused water would preponderate. Right? This is the last case. Then you have the case of filthy water. Right? Filthy water. Right? So we have filthy water and doubtful water. So we'll look at filthy water. Now, filthy water is quite straightforward, right? Filthy water has 3 scenarios and 2 rulings, right? Filthy water, right? Right? Has 3 scenarios and 2 rulings. The 3 scenarios is that the body of water, like if filth falls into the water, this can be a small body of water or a large body of water or flowing water. And what counts in terms of distinguishing between a small body of water and a large body of water is surface area, not depth. It's surface area, not depth. Depth is not of consideration. So if you have a small body of water, if filth falls into it, it makes it najis. If you have a large body of water, filth falls into it, it doesn't make it najis. It doesn't make it filthy. Unless the attributes of the filth become manifest. Color, smell, or taste. Of course, as a footnote, if you have reasonable doubt that there's filth in the water, you cannot deliberately taste it. Right? If you had doubt and you left the doubt, you can taste it, because then you left the doubt. Right? So you looked at there's a body of water, pool, large pool of water, but not that big. There's a mound of brown stuff right where you want to make wudu. Can you drink some water to decide that there's filth in it? No. You could pick it up and smell it. You could see if the color has changed. You can't deliberately taste it. Common sense, right? Rather, what you do, you look at, is it excrement or is it not? Say, no, I don't think it's excrement. You can make wudu there. If you're smart, just go somewhere else. But let's say there's only one place you can access. It happens if you go camping. There's a lake, but there's only one place you can access the water. The other parts, there's steep cliffs or whatever. So, that's a large body of water. And we'll see the definition of a large body of water. There are hadith that mention water being considered by volume. And this is the hadith of al-qullatan. إذا بلغ الماء قلتان أو بلغ الماء قلتين لم يحمل إذا بلغ الماء قلتين لم يحمل الخبث. If water reaches two pots worth, and the qulla were these large pots, it doesn't bear filth. The Sada Shafi'iyya took that opinion, took the hadith of the qullatain. But neither the Hanafis nor the Malikis took that. Why? Just because they didn't feel like it? No. Because those pots, the qullas, or the plural qulal, differ drastically in size. Number one, the hadith has come in a number of ways. Qulla, qullatan, qulla, qullatain, qulal. Right? So there's multiple problems with the hadith. In narration, meaning, and in the narrators not acting upon it. Right? So it's understood in a different way. The literal meaning is not taken. That's the ijtihad of the Hanafi school and also the Maliki school, that we don't take the outward purport of that hadith. It's considered muttarib, considered problematic, and it's given its other interpretation. So there we have a distinction made in the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ between a small body of water and a large body of water with respect to filth. But we don't find anything in the hadith that gives a decisive division between a small body of water and a large body of water. So there's a principle according to Imam Abu Hanifa that al-maqadir لا تنصب إلا من قبل الشارع. المقادير لا تنصب إلا من قبل الشارع. Legal limits are only established by the lawgiver. So the lawgiver, the Prophet ﷺ here, has distinguished between a small body of water, which is made filthy if filth falls into it, and a large body of water, which doesn't become filthy. So how do we distinguish what's a large body of water? The principle of Abu Hanifa that limits are only established by the lawgiver has a corollary or derivative principle, which is وَمَا لَمْ يُقَدِّرْهُ الشَّارِعُ فَهُوَ مُفَوَّضٌ إِلَى رَأْيِ الْمُبْتَلَى. And whatever has not been specified by the lawgiver and requires specification, its specification is left to the one affected. So therefore, according to the principles of Abu Hanifa, rahimahullah, a large body of water would be that which would be considered a large body of water. What is the consideration? That if filth fell on one side, its traces would not reach the other. And that is the theoretically stronger position within the Hanafi school about the large body of water. The large body of water is that which the onlooker would deem to be a large body of water, such that they would exercise their judgment that if filth had fallen on the other side, it would not reach this side. That's theoretically stronger. The ulama from the early centuries did not generally follow that. Why? Because while theoretically stronger, Sister Yuman, do you go around bodies of water in the countryside frequently?
Not really.
No, right? So if you came to a pool of water, if you're hiking with your family and you saw a body of water, firstly, would you easily be able to tell, is this 5 meters by 5 meters? Is this a large body of water or a small body of water? Just by looking at it.
I think it would be difficult.
It'd be difficult. But then, let's say if you said, okay, would the filth reach the other side? Most of us would struggle. So the ulama said that what normally would be, in fact, a large body of water, such that the filth would not reach the other side. So they gave fatwa according to the position mentioned by Imam Shurunbulali. And this has been an argument in the madhab till Hashid ibn Abdin, and even after Hashid ibn Abdin, people have been arguing back and forth about this. But basically there are two opinions about the large body of water. Abu Hanifa's principles would be a large body of water is الماء الكثير ما يستكثره الناظر بحيث لا تصل النجاسة عند وقوعها في طرف إلى طرف آخر. The large body of water is that which the onlooker would deem to be large, such that if filth fell on one side, its traces would not reach the other side. But the fatwa is the large body of water is 10 cubits, 10 أذرع, and a dhira is an arm's length, right? Which is from fingertips to elbows, which is roughly 50 centimeters. Some say 48, but 48, 50 centimeters. And 1 cubit is 2 handspans. You can try it on yourself, most of us. It's 2, if you consider to elbow, right? Okay? Pretty much exactly, give or take a little digit, roughly. So they gave that. And that's what the fatwa is upon, and that's what is mentioned by Mawlana al-Imam Shurunbulali. So he says, وَالرَّابِعُ
والرابع ماء نجس وهو الذي حلت فيه نجاسة وكان راكدا قليلا والقليل ما دون 10 في 10 فينجس بها وإن لم يظهر أثرها فيه أو كان جاريا وظهر فيه أثرها والأثر طعم أو لون أو ريح.
Okay. So the fourth type of water is filthy water, which is water in which filth falls and it is small and still. Right? And a small body of water is that which is less than 10 by 10. 10 cubits by 10 cubits, which is 5 meters by 5 meters. And what counts as surface area? وَلَا عِبْرَةَ لِلْعُمْقِ. And there's no consideration of depth, as long as it would be considered a body of water. So a small body of water becomes filthy if filth falls into it, even if the traces of filth are not manifest. So that bucket of water, right? That bucket of Usman's bucket, which his friend made wudu with, while making wudu, 2 drops of blood fell from his nose into the bucket. And it's a clear bucket. You can't see any traces of the filth. No color, no smell, and we're not tasting it, but let's say there was no taste of it either. Is it filthy? Yes. Even a little bit of filth falls into a small body of water, it makes it filthy. If it falls, for sure. If there's a large body of water, or if there's a large body of water, which is more than 5 meters by 5 meters, or flowing water, al-ma'ul jari, then it becomes filthy if the traces of the filth are manifest. Right? The traces of water are the taste of filth, the color of the filth, or the smell of the filth itself. Right? So, small body of water, filth falls into it, it renders it filthy. Large body of water, more than 5 meters by 5 meters, in surface area, or flowing water, and flowing water is that which is considered flowing. Al-ma'ul jari ma yu'addu jariyan. Same principle of Imam Abu Hanifa. Flowing water does not become filthy. What is flowing water? Is that which is considered flowing. You'd call it flowing. Flowing is, of course, a lateral concept. The sign of flowing is that it comes in from one side, exits from another. ما يدخل من جانب ويخرج من جانب. Or they said ما يذهب بالتبنة. That which, if you put a straw, it would take it away. That's flowing. So that's water that becomes filthy. There are a whole bunch of things that are excused. Anything that is difficult to avoid and is common is excused. So for example, classically, and we'll see that, if excrement falls into milk, does it render it filthy? You're milking a cow, same bucket. You're milking a cow, and a little bit of excrement falls into the milk. Does it become filthy? Depends. If you take it out immediately and no trace of the excrements in the milk, it's excused. Many other things that are difficult to avoid, from a pool of water, if you took a bucket of water out and it had a little bit of dung, is the water najis? Of animal excrement, it's excused. Whole bunch of things are excused, as we will see. That's if it is actual filth, it gets excused. So don't get surrounded by doubts. You go to an old house and water comes out from the tap. It stinks. It's stinking. Does it mean it's najis? No. You go to the water tank and there's all kinds of plants growing in the water. Does that make the water najis? So whether it's clean or unclean is one thing, is it pure or impure is another. Pollution is not filth, right? So we have a reasonably insanely polluted lake right here in the in Toronto, right? Lake Ontario. But let's say you're in one of the times of year where some of the rivers flowing into Lake Ontario have a lot of pollution in them. And sometimes there are pollution warnings about you're not supposed to be swimming in Lake Ontario. But those polluted streams, pollution is not filthy. Simple as that, right? The fifth, we're not going to talk about it much. The fifth category of water is
والخامس ماء مشكوك في طهوريته وهو ما شرب منه حمار أو بغل.
Right? The fifth category of water is doubtful water, which is water regarding whose purifying nature there is doubt. And doubt, so this water is pure. However, because of conflicting evidence, Imam Abu Hanifa and the scholars of the madhab said, we are not sure, meaning we have tawaqquf, right? We stop at the affirmation of it being purifying or not because of conflicting evidences. And this is a rare case, we're not going to go into it. So the doubt is as to its purifying nature. The doubt is not from the lawgiver. It's that Imam Abu Hanifa took a position of caution. That is this purifying or not? He said, I do not know. Or atawaqqaf. I have tawaqquf. And that is water that's the leftover water that a donkey or a mule, al-baghl, which is a baghl is a mule. Ma ummuhu atan. What is it? Because lineage in animals is established from the side of the mother, correct? Right? And what is an atan? A female donkey. Right? When it comes to names of animals and plants and vegetables, I feel like the like the atan, because I don't know animal names in any language, colors, all these things. But anyways, fajazakallah khair, we have. So something that a donkey or a mule drank from, it drank from that water. There's tawaqquf in it. If you don't find other water, what do? We'll see. You use it and make tayammum as well. If there's no other water. If there's other water, you must use the other water. And then he tells us about leftover water. Then he tells us about leftover water, and this is called as-su'r. So we'll look at that next, quickly, bi'idhnillahi ta'ala, and then we'll come to the issue of at-tahari. What if water or clothing gets mixed up, right? And that has practical implications. And then we come to the rulings of wells. We are, bi'idhnillahi ta'ala, going to breeze through the rulings of wells. The ruling of wells, bi'idhnillahi ta'ala, we're going to record separately, because it's a wonderfully exciting topic if you're a nerd, but you can nerd at your own time. We'll record those separately. So next class we're going to cover leftover water and ahkam al-tahari. Right? Like what if things get mixed up? And there's very useful rulings related to tahari. Right? If, Sidi Hamza's friend, when the dog urinated on him, he actually woke up. So his shirt had najasa on it, but it got mixed up with other items of clothing. He doesn't remember which one got najis. So what does he do? If items of clothing got mixed up, if drink got mixed up, if food got mixed up, if vessels of water got mixed up. So it has some practical implications, and in that we'll also see the rulings related to dealing with certainty and doubt. So it's a very important section. Leftover water can be dealt with very quickly, so we'll look at those leftover water and then exercising one's judgment. Wells, we'll provide you the class for that to listen to in your own time, bi'idhnillahi ta'ala. It is important, it's illustrative of different principles. It still has applications. I've had to apply the rulings of wells twice in my life, because a tank of water is like a well in its rulings and implications. And twice, once in Damascus and once in Jordan, an animal died in our water tank. I was deliriously happy, because my wife's the one who, I said, I'll go. I said, what are you going to do? You're going to fall into the tank to please stay and read. She had to deal with it. I was so happy because we got to apply the rulings of well water. And these things happen. People ask about them as well. They illustrate some principles, but we're going to take them quickly. Any questions before we close for tonight? Go ahead. Go ahead.
Yeah, I have a question, sorry, about the scenario of the cow's milk, if droppings fall into it. You mentioned that if there is no athar, then there is no najasa. Is this like the raf'at haraj? It's different than the water?
Yeah. So there's that's coming up in a little bit of the ma yu'fa anhu min al-najasa. There's a whole bunch of things that are excused, and it goes to a few principles, right? Which is that the general principle in the Sharia is haraj madfu'. Hardship is lifted. Right? Why? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, la yukallifu Allahu nafsan illa wus'aha. Avoiding certain things are not in the general person's capacity. Allah has not placed any hardship for you. وَمَا جَعَلَ عَلَيْكُمْ فِي الدِّينِ مِنْ حَرَجٍ إِنَّ هَذَا الدِّينَ يُسْرٌ, etc. Many general principles, but also we see that the rulings of purity are based on caution yet ease. Caution that we avoid filth. We avoid filth, but they're based on ease, that in doubt we assume purity. Right? Caution. So if we have containers of water, we cover them. We cover them. Right? We keep our clothing from najasa, etc. But when there's doubt, we assume purity. And it's based on being easygoing. Why? Because especially if you're out and about, filth can be difficult to avoid. And the judgment of filth makes it difficult to, and you're not held account even if afterwards it ends up being to the contrary. So I know somebody who, as a child, would urinate onto those going to Salatul Jumu'ah. Now, if you walk by and you felt some hot liquid on your shoulder on your way to Jumu'ah, the sunnah is not even to look up. You assume purity, you do your Jumu'ah, it's not from caution to check. Don't even turn your head to smell. Assume purity, keep going. That's what Sayyidina Umar ibn al-Khattab, who's better than you and me, practiced. Someone said, let's ask the owner. He said, do not ask. And many other examples. And so that's one. The other is the things where there'd be difficulty. Now, of course, in our times, if you have other milk, should you drink that milk? That's a separate point. But would it be legally considered tahir? It has implications. Could you give it to other animals, etc.? Now, if there's laws about hygiene and stuff, that's a separate matter. Should you drink it is one thing. Can you drink it is another. Can you, in terms of tahara and najasa, is tahir. Now, can you sell it? Can you sell it without declaring it, etc.? That returns to market standards and the law. Because the preservation of public interest is the duty of the government, right? But it's tahir. Right? In choice, everybody knows you drink some other milk. But some people who are living in subsistence conditions, sometimes they don't have that kind of luxury that we have.
There's a question. What is the minimum size of an area of still water that one can make ghusl with? Does an average sized home bath count, or is a shower required after?
So what's the minimum size of tub that you can make a bath with? Ghusl entails washing the entire body, which is that water flows over the entire body. So any amount of water that you get into and that either water actually flows over you or you put yourself into a tub of water, right? It's better to pour water over oneself because that's closer to the sunnah, right? But if at the end of your rolling about in a little bit of water is that your body got washed, then your body got washed, right? But if you have a little bit of water, the sunnah would be pour the water over yourself. That would be a better thing to do. No, the subtle, because it has a subtlety for mud. Does mud flow? You don't know mud that well then. No, mud flows. And it might not flow. Sorry, we used to play soccer a lot on muddy fields. So I used to like slide tackling, so I know a lot about mud. I used to relish it because it would be more dramatic when you slide tackled in mud. So mud is flowing, but it's not raqiq. Honey flows, but is it subtle? Like, does it have the subtlety of water? No. Right? Don't use fancy scientific words with me. Right? Sorry. Okay. So we'll stop there. Wa sallallahu ala Sayyidina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa sallam.